The words dropped like a thunderclap, slicing through the static of routine political chatter. Cameras flashed, reporters froze mid-scribble, and the air in the press room felt suddenly heavier, charged with the kind of electricity that only erupts when history pivots. Donald Trump had just done what few dared. He called out Vladimir Putin directly and without filters, his voice steady but edged with steel. In that instant, the old rules seemed to collapse. The safe choreography of diplomatic language, the half-smiles, the coded phrases, the polite evasions shattered under the weight of Trump's raw, unvarnished declaration. Journalists exchanged wide-eyed glances, some mouths open, others shaking their heads as though trying to process the audacity of what they had just heard. Beyond the press room, the internet detonated. Headlines appeared within seconds. Trump issues warning to Putin. Historic confrontation unfolds in real time. Twitter feeds flooded with disbelief, memes, and hashtags that rocketed to the top within minutes. TikTok edits stitched together his words with ominous music, each clip feeding the storm of speculation. Was this bluster? Or was this a turning point in the global balance of power? For those watching live, it was more than a political statement. It felt like an unraveling, a curtain pulled back on a drama no one was sure they wanted to see. Here was the former president, framed against a sea of flashing cameras, breaking the silence that most leaders tiptoe around when it comes to Putin. The message wasn't veiled. It was direct, confrontational, and personal. In living rooms, offices, and cafes across America, audiences leaned in. Immigrants who had fled regimes like Putin's felt a shiver of recognition, the kind that stirs memories of power unchallenged. Progressives who had long criticized Trump now faced a paradoxical moment. Admiration tangled with suspicion, intrigue laced with apprehension. Could this be a crack in the facade? Or simply another performance in the endless theater of power? The stakes were nuclear, literally. Everyone knew what sat behind Putin's glare. The arsenal, the threats, the unspoken possibility of catastrophe. And here was Trump, calling him out in front of the world. But to understand why Trump's words hit like a thunderclap, we need to rewind to the buildup that made this moment inevitable. Raise the stakes. To understand the weight of Trump's warning, you have to step back into the stormy backdrop that defined US-Russia relations. This wasn't just another off-the-cuff remark thrown into the media cycle. No, it came against years of shadow wars, energy battles, and military standoffs that had left nerves frayed and allies divided. Russia had already become the master of invisible warfare. Cyber attacks had pierced into American infrastructure, hacking pipelines, breaching government servers, and sowing chaos across everyday life. Each digital incursion felt like a reminder. Moscow could reach into the very veins of American society without firing a single bullet. And while politicians debated sanctions or issued stern press releases, the attacks kept coming, like whispers in the dark, reminding everyone that Putin's hand was always reaching, always testing. Then came Ukraine, the defining clash of the decade. Putin's decision to invade was more than a geopolitical gamble. It was a declaration that the post-Cold War order could be rewritten by brute force. Images of shattered cities, families fleeing with nothing but small suitcases, and resistance fighters standing against tanks became symbols of both horror and resilience. The world watched, horrified, yet often paralyzed. For the US, it wasn't just about Ukraine's sovereignty, it was about whether democracy itself could withstand the assault of authoritarianism. Energy politics only thickened the tension. Europe, tethered to Russian gas, hesitated to act boldly, knowing Putin could freeze cities with the twist of a valve. The US found itself straddling a razor's edge, pushed too hard, and economies shatter. Do too little, and Putin grows bolder. Every sanction, every embargo, every barrel of oil carried consequences that rippled through households from Berlin to Boston. And then there was NATO, a cornerstone alliance suddenly cast into doubt. Trump had long criticized its uneven burden sharing, calling out countries for freeloading while America footed the bill. That criticism echoed louder now, as Russian tanks rolled westward. Could NATO hold together if Putin pressed harder? Could America still guarantee the shield that generations had trusted? These questions weren't abstract. They carried the weight of soldiers' lives, taxpayers' futures, and the very credibility of the Western order. So when Trump's voice cut through the noise, it wasn't just another politician speaking to the cameras. His words threatened to shift the fragile balance of deterrence, to test the delicate lines that had kept the Cold War cold and prevented the new one from turning hot. Every analyst, every diplomat, every family who still remembered hiding under desks during nuclear drills felt the sting of possibility. What if rhetoric became reality? What if this warning turned into action? For progressives, for immigrants, for those whose families had lived under strongmen, the anxiety ran deeper. They knew what unchecked power could do. They had seen nations collapse into silence under the weight of a single man's will. And here, before their eyes, was a confrontation not wrapped in diplomacy but thrown like a gauntlet. That was the risk and the allure. Viewers couldn't turn away because they knew history doesn't announce itself politely. It comes in jolts, in warnings, in the kind of words that change the course of nations. But the real shock wasn't just in the warning itself. It was in who Trump was really addressing. Antagonist backstory: Putin's power. To understand the chill that ran through the world when Trump called out Vladimir Putin, you have to understand the man himself. Putin is not merely a politician. He is a figure crafted in the shadows of secrecy and control, a relic of the KGB who transformed himself into the iron-fisted ruler of modern Russia. Born in the crumbling years of the Soviet Union, Putin was drawn early to the world of espionage. The KGB became his training ground, sharpening him into a master of observation, manipulation, and silence. While others built careers in business or academia, Putin mastered the art of studying weaknesses and exploiting them. He was not flashy, not charismatic in the traditional sense, but in every room he entered, he was the one who noticed more than he revealed. That quiet, calculating nature would become his greatest weapon. When the Soviet Union collapsed, chaos engulfed Russia. Oligarchs rose, fortunes were stolen, and ordinary citizens suffered. Amid that chaos, Putin emerged as the figure who promised order. He rose through the ranks not by chance, but by relentless precision, always staying close to power, yet never appearing threatening until the very moment he was indispensable. By the year 2000, he had maneuvered his way into the presidency, and once he grasped power, he never let it go. His reign has been defined by control, absolute, suffocating control. Independent media outlets silenced, political opponents imprisoned or exiled, critics poisoned in eerie, high-profile cases that sent chilling messages to anyone who dared oppose him. Journalists who exposed corruption met suspicious ends. Dissidents vanished. In Russia, people learned to speak carefully, to whisper doubts, to measure every word against the invisible but ever-present boundary of state surveillance. And yet, while repression gripped the nation, Putin cultivated a myth. Propaganda machines rolled endlessly, painting him as the strongman's savior, the bare-chested hunter, the judo master, the guardian of Russian pride. Billboards, television anchors, state-sponsored films all echoed the same story. Putin was Russia, and Russia was Putin. It was a narrative designed not just to inspire loyalty, but to instill fear of what might happen if he were ever gone. Globally, his reputation was just as fearsome. He became the archetype of authoritarian power in the 21st century, the man who could stare down presidents, threaten Europe with energy cutoffs, or shift elections abroad with cyber campaigns. He thrived on unpredictability, using ambiguity as a weapon. Was Russia truly behind the hacks? Was he bluffing about nuclear readiness? The uncertainty was deliberate, designed to keep adversaries paralyzed. But beneath the aura of invincibility lies the record of ruthlessness. From the flattening of Grozny in Chechnya to the annexation of Crimea, Putin showed the world that he valued dominance over diplomacy. Civilian suffering was not a deterrent, it was a tool. Every military incursion, every show of force, reinforced the image of a man untouchable, unyielding, and willing to go further than anyone else dared. Inside Russia, his approval ratings became less a reflection of love and more a reflection of fear and resignation. State television glorified him daily, While alternative voices were drowned out or erased, the message was clear. Putin does not lose. Putin does not apologize. Putin does not bow. For immigrants watching from afar, those who had fled regimes like his, the sight of Putin's grip on Russia stirred old wounds. They remembered leaders who ruled through intimidation, who silenced entire communities, who made the population complicit in its own oppression by normalizing fear. For progressives in America, Putin embodied everything they opposed: authoritarianism, repression, toxic nationalism, and yet this villain thrived because the world often chose caution over confrontation. Diplomats treaded lightly, presidents measured their words' care,